Last night, there were no shootings, there were no arrests. Joining me tonight on a rapid response panel, Zerlina Maxwell, contributor for Essence. Also with us tonight, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, MSNBC political analyst and professor at Georgetown University. I want to start with this. Earlier today, St. Louis police lieutenant reacted to the shooting. Here it is.
This is a fresh wound. This is something that's just happened within, it's not even 12 months. You know, the decision was in November. You know, the Department of Justice report was released last week again. So this is, it's a wound that's going to take time to heal. Although I think that as a community, we can come together and accomplish that.
So how are people on the ground responding? MSNBC's Craig Melvin spoke to residents of Ferguson last night.
What's the end game?
The end game is to continue to fight until we have a system that is going to be equal to everyone.
We've had 3 top officials step down over the past week or so in this area. Is that not enough?
No, it's nothing.
Zerlina, what's the cure? Are we on a new path now for Ferguson? What's your sense of it?
I think the first step in terms of starting that new path is to honestly confront the institutional racism that the Ferguson report showed and that the protesters have been saying over and over and over again for the past 7 months. And the report served as proof and evidence of what their gripes were with the Ferguson Police Department. And I think that oftentimes, especially when you have people in the streets and you have a minority of those folks being violent or causing a ruckus. And in this particular case with this shooting, we actually do not know anything about the shooter. So to say that it has something to do with the peaceful protesters, I think is a little bit misleading generally. But I think that we have to focus on the substantive issues that the protesters are bringing to light that the Department of Justice report showed are true. And we have to start confronting racism and implicit bias that may be in police departments, not just in Ferguson, but all throughout the country.
Dr. Dyson, do you feel like Ferguson is starting to turn the corner?
Well, I think it's starting to turn a corner, but people mistake the turning of the corner for achieving the entire scope of what Ms. Maxwell just referred to. We're turning a corner, but we've got to understand that it's just the beginning of the entire block, which is in a neighborhood, which is in a city, which is in a nation. So, yeah, turning the corner, but there's a lot more work to be done, Ed. Ms. Maxwell talked about the fact that the Justice Department made a report that is pretty damning. And the president said, as Ms. Maxwell said, look, people are not making this up. This is not illusionary. You know, people accuse black people and others of their allies. Oh, you're just kind of generating this stuff out of whole cloth, but it's not. So when we address systemic racism, when we address systematic inequality, when we address the fact that people have to stand up and assert their own political right to exist at the polls and in the streets, then we begin to see the substance of change we're speaking about. And then when the entire community begins to embrace that change, not just seeing these people as interlopers or others of their allies as somehow intervening on a process that they are not likely to be welcome to. When we begin to see this as part of our destiny as American citizens, then substance of change can occur.
Right.
Not that this gentleman has any credibility at all, but Rudy Giuliani does get a lot of attention. He says he wants President Obama and he needs him to act more like Bill Cosby. Dr. Dyson, what's your reaction to this kind of rhetoric?
Well, I guess Mr. Giuliani thinks that Mr. Cosby being a comedian is not enough, so he wants to tell jokes as well. Look, it is unfortunate at this particular point in Mr. Cosby's career that Mr. Giuliani would point to him as an example of what must be done. But number two, where have you been? Obama has been on his Bill Cosby-like podium from the very beginning. When his speech before the church in Chicago, where he told black men to step up to the plate, at Morehouse College, at the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. Now, I happen to disagree with these particular interventions, but the point is that they have been made and in the very similar position, that Rudy Giuliani has adopted and Bill Cosby asserted, Mr. Obama, President Obama, did the same thing. So I think he's been asleep on him.
Zerlina, isn't Ferguson, Missouri now trying to develop a new model? I mean, with what has unfolded in that community, the national attention that it's gotten, the attention from the Justice Department, this report, and then a city manager stepping down, then a police chief stepping down. I mean, aren't we looking for a model here, how to turn communities around? What do we go by?
Well, I think that the White House task force that actually went to not only just Ferguson and St. Louis, the St. Louis area, but all across the country, and not only used activists and experts and people who can reform police departments. They have a report with recommendations on how to move forward, and that includes not only having independent investigations into police killings, having special prosecutors appointed when you have situations when there is this much internal corruption within the system, and you have essentially a district attorney in Ferguson who is tasked with working with the same police department that we're trying to get him to indict for killing a citizen. Yeah. And so there are embedded inequalities and inequities in the system that unfortunately are impacting people of color in brown and black bodies. And that consistency, the fact that since Mike Brown died 7 months ago, we've had nearly someone brown or black killed by a police officer every single day, and that has to end. We can no longer, use respectability politics, or black people aren't, abiding by police instruction quick enough in order to deserve life. You deserve life and respect, and the police officers are tasked with, serving and protecting the community, and that needs to be where we start, with the community policing at the center of these reforms.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Dyson, a very direct question. What does the black community in Ferguson have to do now as you see it?
First of all, they got to continue to keep the pressure up. Secondly, they must abide by the new revelations of the Justice Department report, and then systematically plan to implement on their part substantive things that can change their communities. Thirdly, they got to show up at the polls and vote, because when they begin to change the complex and the outlook of the elected officials there, they begin to take their destinies into their own hands. And then finally, begin to reach out and mentor some of those young people who are there. Some of those young leaders who are doing tremendous things must be embraced and celebrated. And if the entire community stands behind them, it'll be an extraordinary thing.
Zerlina Maxwell, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, great to have you with us tonight. Thanks so much for joining us.